Hello, I am Pedro Mora from Pacific Media and now Poland. Today we continue to present the World Peace Forum. This time a workshop with Mark Leier and Geoff Mann. Mark Leier, a history professor of Simon Fraser University, explains how labor became the junior partner during the World War. Here is Mark.
What is actually the period in Canadian history for some of labor's greatest successes, not without some costs, as I'll talk about, though, is the Second World War, because that changes the economic realities and it gives workers a chance to organize and fight back, because the Second World War, of course, represents a kind of Keynesian militarism that primes the economy. It's a stimulus package of great proportions. As you all know, the bitter irony is that the Canadian government spent very little on relief, but was quite happy to spend billions to blow other workers to bits. But the effect of that was to revitalize a staggering economy. It's also takes lots of people out of the workforce to send them off to blow other people to bits, which creates essentially a labor shortage in Canada. And it also means, with new industries evolving, Canada, I think at the beginning of the Second World War, had enough artillery shells to fire a barrage for about 90 minutes. To create that kind of industry, of course, also represented a massive investment in the infrastructure. So we see here that it's pretty obvious to government and capital that they need labor on its side to fight this war. This is their early poster, "It's our war," and of course the hand clenching the fist looks like it comes from the Soviet Union, perhaps in the 1920s. You know? But it doesn't. It actually comes from Canada. But it's pretty clear that there's some very shrewd people doing public relations for the Canadian government. And their idea of how this was going to work is shown in this poster here. This is our strength. Labor and management are pooling their strength to give us the means for victory in the war and progress in peace. This question of labor cooperation becomes a big one during the war, in part because Canadian workers during the 1930s had made it very clear that they were not about to let the terrible conditions of the Depression continue. And they were, as you know, beginning to organize to fight back during the Depression. So that direct action, that militancy in the streets and events, like the sit-in at the post office, like the On to Ottawa trek, made governments very attuned to the idea that they needed to work hard to get labor on side. Well, if you want higher wages, let me tell you what to do. You got to talk to the workers in the shop with you. Got to build you a union, got to build it strong. But if you all stick together, boys, it won't be long, we'll get shorter hours. Better working conditions. Vacations with pay, take your kids to the seashore. This is still out of tune, but it's called a talking union, so I'm just going to talk it. So it ain't quite that simple, so I better explain just why you get to ride on the union train, because if you wait for the boss to raise your pay, well, I'll be waiting for Judgment Day, we'll all be dead. I'll be buried, gone to heaven. St. Peter will be the straw boss then. Now, you know you're underpaid, but the boss says you ain't, and he speeds up the work till you're about to fade. You may be down and out, but you ain't beaten. You can pass out a leaflet and call up a meeting, talk it over. Speak your mind. Decide to do something about it. Of course, the boss may persuade some poor damn fool to go to your meeting and act like a stool, but you can always tell a stool, boys, and that's a fact. He's got a big yellow streak running down his back. You don't have to stool. He'll always get along on what he steals out of blind men's cups. Oh, you got you a union now, and you're sitting pretty. You got some of the boys on the steering committee. The boss won't listen when one man squawks, but he's got to listen when the union talks. He'd better. He'd be mighty lonely one of these days if we all decide to walk out on him. What's also remarkable about this is that it flies in the face of this idea of labor's cooperation with management. It says, yeah, we're patriotic, we'll fight, and we're going to go on strike, and we're going to organize, and we're going to vote for left-wing parties at the same time. Workers did not accept the happy picture of management and industry holding up production together. They used this economic opportunity to go on strike, to raise wages, and to call upon the governments of the day to make social changes to ensure that the terrible conditions of the Depression did not return. The other significant thing is the kinds of people who are organizing into unions in this period. So first is that workers are not quiescent, that they're striking in greater numbers than before. The second is that women are coming into the workforce in big numbers, which is a huge social change in Canada. The third is that workers are now organizing in the mass industries, something that happened earlier in the United States, in part because of the success of the Wagner Act. Canada's alternative, or I guess it's not an alternative to the Wagner Act, but the complement to the Wagner Act, starts in 1943 with something called Privy Council Order 1003, a cabinet order that gives Canadian workers many of the same rights and responsibilities that American workers got with the Wagner Act almost 10 years before. It says for the first time that workers cannot be fired for trying to join a union. It says that the purpose of bargaining is to come to an agreement, and so workers or management that do not bargain in good faith can be penalized. It outlines a host of unfair labor practices. It recognizes that the employer is still much stronger than individual workers and even collective workers, so it tries to balance the playing field, level it out a little, saying that when there's an organizing drive, employers cannot talk to they cannot talk to workers about the drive. It says that they can't hire or fire or promote people or adjust wage rates if there's an organizing drive going on. It creates really the kind of industrial relations framework that we're all, I was going to say that we're all used to working under today, but in fact we're not, because it's been eroded over the last 30 years. But it does make some significant changes. And as a result, Canadian workers go on strike more often during the war and after the war as well. But they reject this notion that there is a partnership here. And they see the war and they seize the war as an opportunity to make demands and to press the small advantage that they have because of the changing economic conditions. And we really see most of the effect of this right after the war. We see it for a couple of reasons. The first is, of course, PC 1003 doesn't get enacted and doesn't really become an issue until 1944, 1945. The other thing that happens during the war, however, is that Canadian workers are showing how far they're moving to the left. They are voting for the CCF in large numbers. By 1944, the CCF is the official opposition in British Columbia. It's the official opposition in Ontario. And oh my God, in Saskatchewan, it becomes the government of the day under Tommy Douglas.